The smell of expensive perfume and old money always made me feel like I was suffocating. Standing in the marble hallway of St. Jude's Academy, I adjusted the strap of my thrifted backpack, feeling the weight of 1,000 judging eyes. But I wasn't the same girl who had walked these halls a year ago. I wasn't the girl who had been crushed under the wheels of a black SUV after being branded a thief. I was a ghost who had clawed her way back from the afterlife, and this time, I knew the secret behind the Golden Girl of Manhattan. Serafina Vanderbilt was leaning against a locker, surrounded by a court of admirers. She looked like a Botticelli painting, golden hair, porcelain skin, and a smile that looked like it cost more than my father's annual salary. As I walked past, her eyes locked onto mine. Suddenly, I felt a familiar, invasive pressure in the back of my skull. It was a cold, sliding sensation, like a snake slithering through my thoughts. She's doing it, I realized, my heart hammering in my chest. She's listening. "Maya, babe," Serafina called out, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. She glided over and draped an arm over my shoulder. "I was just thinking about the senior coding capstone. You've been so quiet lately. Are you stuck? You know I'm always here to help my favorite scholarship girl." In my head, I didn't panic. I didn't think about the revolutionary neural mapping algorithm I had spent the last 3 weeks perfecting in the basement of our Bronx apartment. Instead, I forced my mind to visualize a blank, white wall. Then, I began to broadcast a rhythmic, annoying loop of a nursery rhyme. The wheels on the bus go round and round. Serafina's smile flickered for a microsecond. A tiny crease appeared between her perfectly groomed brows. She let go of my shoulder, her fingers twitching. "You're acting strange today," she murmured, her eyes searching mine for a crack in the armor. "Just tired, Serafina," I said, keeping my voice flat. "The Bronx is loud at night, not like the Upper East Side." As I walked away, I felt her gaze burning into my back. I knew what she wanted. In my previous life, Serafina had pioneered an app that predicted stock market fluctuations with 99% accuracy. It had won her the National Science Talent Search and a full ride to Stanford. Everyone called her a once-in-a-generation genius. No one knew she had plucked every line of code directly from my brain while we sat together in the library. When I tried to speak up, she used her father's legal team to frame me for hacking her private server. I was expelled, my reputation was incinerated, and then came the accident. But the wheels on the bus were still spinning in my head. If she wanted to live inside my mind, I was going to make it a house of mirrors. I was going to feed her exactly what she needed to destroy herself. The following weeks were a grueling exercise in mental discipline. I had to live 2 lives, one on paper and one in the echoing chambers of my mind. To pass my classes, I wrote my real code at 3 a.m. on an air-gapped laptop that never left my sight. But during school hours, I practiced the art of the mental decoy. I sat in the library, knowing Serafina was 2 tables away, her eyes hidden behind a designer pair of blue light glasses. I opened a notebook and began sketching out a new project, a clean energy battery that used a specific saltwater electrolyte. "This is it," I thought loudly, making the image in my mind vivid and bright. The magnesium-ion bridge is the key. If I use a 0.5 molar concentration, the energy density triples. It's a billion-dollar discovery. I have to keep it hidden. Serafina can't know. I could practically feel her leaning in, her mental ears straining to catch the nuances of the chemical formula. I intentionally thought about a fatal flaw, a specific catalyst that would cause the battery to look stable during testing, but undergo a catastrophic thermal runaway after 48 hours of continuous use. I obsessed over the flaw in my mind, framing it as the secret ingredient that made it all work. "Hey, Maya," a voice whispered. It was Liam, my boyfriend. He was a silver-tongued charmer from a middle-class family who spent every waking hour trying to blend in with the 1%. He sat down and squeezed my hand. "You've been working so hard. Serafina's dad is hosting a mixer for the scholarship kids this weekend. You should come. He's looking for projects to fund through the Vanderbilt Foundation." I looked at Liam, a bitter taste in my mouth. In my first life, Liam had been the one to find the forged logs on my computer. He had traded my life for a job at Vanderbilt Tech. "I don't know, Liam," I said, playing the role of the nervous, insecure girl. "My project. It's not ready. It's too big. If someone stole it, I'd lose everything. Nobody's going to steal it, Liam promised, his eyes darting toward Serafina. I'll protect you. That night, I left my private journal in my locker, a journal filled with the flawed saltwater battery data written in a frantic, obsessive hand. I knew Liam had a spare key. I knew he would take it straight to Serafina. The next day at school, the atmosphere had shifted. Serafina was no longer frustrated. She was radiant. She walked with a new bounce in her step, and her father's black SUV was parked out front more often. The Vanderbilt Foundation announced they were pivoting their entire R&D department to green energy storage. I sat in the back of the cafeteria, eating a soggy sandwich, and projected a sense of overwhelming dread. I let my mind scream. No, they're moving into batteries. Did she find it? Did Liam tell her? Across the room, Serafina caught my eye and raised a chilled bottle of sparkling water in a mock toast. She thought she had won. She thought she had reached into my soul and stolen the fire of the gods. She didn't realize she was holding a ticking time bomb. The Palo Alto Tech Gala was the pinnacle of the industry. The air was thick with the smell of gourmet food and the hum of high-voltage ambition. Serafina stood on the main stage, illuminated by a halo of spotlights. Behind her, a massive screen displayed the logo for the Serafina cell. My father always told me that the future belongs to those who see what others cannot. Serafina told the crowd of investors and journalists. Her voice was steady, practiced. She looked like a visionary. While others were focused on software, I looked at the earth. I found a way to store the sun in a drop of salt water. I stood in the shadows at the back of the hall, wearing a simple black dress. Beside me, Liam was beaming, his hand resting possessively on my waist. He had no idea I had recorded his meeting with Serafina's father 2 weeks ago. "She's amazing, isn't she?" Liam whispered. "You should be happy for her, Maya. At least your inspiration led to something real." "Oh, it's real, Liam," I murmured. "More real than you can imagine." I closed my eyes and focused. I stopped the nursery rhymes. I stopped the white walls. I opened the floodgates of my mind and focused entirely on the gala's centerpiece. The massive 500 kWh Serafina cell prototype that was currently powering the entire stage. 48 hours, I thought, projecting the message directly at the stage. That was the limit. "Serafina, did you check the magnesium-ion bridge? Did you calculate the heat dissipation of the catalyst I invented?" Serafina's speech faltered. She gripped the podium, her knuckles turning white. She could hear me. For the first time in this life, I wasn't hiding. I was shouting in the silence of her head. "It's starting, Serafina," I broadcasted. "The temperature in the core is rising. The salt water isn't an electrolyte anymore. It's an accelerant." On stage, a low, tectonic hum began to vibrate through the floor. A technician in a headset scurried toward the prototype, his face pale in the glow of his tablet. The audience began to murmur, sensing the shift in energy. Serafina looked out into the crowd, her eyes frantic. She found me. I stood perfectly still, a cold smile playing on my lips. "You didn't understand the math, did you?" I thought. "You just copied the lines. You're nothing but a tape recorder. The cooling system is stable." Serafina suddenly blurted out into the microphone, answering a question I hadn't asked aloud. "It's perfectly stable. Maya, stop it." The room went dead silent. The investors looked at each other. Who was Maya? Serafina was arguing with thin air. "It's not stable," I projected with the force of a physical blow. "Look at the pressure gauge." A loud crack echoed through the hall. A jet of steam hissed from the side of the Serafina cell. The lights on stage flickered and died, plunged into a terrifying, red-hued emergency glow. The Golden Girl stood in the dark, trembling as her empire began to hiss and smoke. The evacuation was chaotic, but I didn't run. I stayed in the foyer, watching through the glass doors as fire crews swarmed the building. The Serafina cell hadn't exploded. I wasn't a murderer, but it had melted into a heap of toxic slag, destroying the Vanderbilt reputation in a single, spectacular failure. Serafina stumbled out of the building, her golden hair singed, her $5,000 dress ruined. Her father, Julian Vanderbilt, was right behind her, his face a mask of purple rage. "What happened?" he roared at the lead engineer. "You said she gave you the finalized data." "I did," Serafina screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me as I stepped forward. "She told me," I heard her. "She told me the bridge was the key, She planted it in my head. The journalists, who had been hungry for a quote, turned their cameras toward her. Julian Vanderbilt looked at his daughter like she was a stranger. In her head, "Serafina, what are you talking about? You said you spent a year in the lab." I walked up to them, my face the picture of concerned innocence. "Serafina, are you okay? You're talking about my senior capstone project. But I told you months ago that the saltwater battery was a failure. I abandoned that data because it was dangerous. Why would you try to build it? You forged the journal?" Serafina lunged at me, but a security guard stepped between us. "You knew I was listening. You did this to me." "Listening to what?" I asked softly, my voice carrying to every microphone in the vicinity. "Serafina, we haven't spoken in weeks. If you stole my discarded research from my locker, that's a legal matter. But claiming you heard me think it? You sound like you've had a breakdown." The headlines the next morning were brutal. VANDRBILT heiress claims telepathy as multi billion-dollar prototype melts down. The investors pulled out within hours. A federal investigation was launched into the Vanderbilt Foundation for industrial espionage and safety violations. Julian Vanderbilt, desperate to save his own skin, threw his daughter under the bus, claiming she had deluded the board with stolen, unverified data. Liam tried to come back to me, of course. He showed up at my Bronx apartment with flowers, talking about how he always knew I was the real genius. I didn't even open the door. I just sent a single text. "I recorded the night you took the journal. The police have it." 6 months later, I stood in a much smaller, much quieter room, the office of a patent attorney. I laid out the schematics for my actual neural mapping algorithm. It wasn't a battery. It was a way to help people with locked-in syndrome communicate. It was a tool for healing, not for stealing. As for Serafina, the noise never stopped. Without her source to steal from, and with the trauma of the public failure, her mind became a chaotic storm of every thought she had ever stolen. Last I heard, she was in a private facility in upstate New York, screaming about the wheels on the bus and chemical formulas that didn't exist. I walked out into the crisp Manhattan air, finally alone in my own head. My grandmother was waiting for me at the corner, a proud smile on her face. I didn't need to read her mind to know what she was thinking. For the first time in 2 lives, the future was mine to write. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video.